What's going on, y'all? It's another episode of Minding Your Biz. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Blackwell. We got...
Hey, it's your girl, Miss Fat Financial, coming to you on this special day.
So another live edition of our episode with a special guest this time.
So we do have a special guest.
Our first special guest. So this is I got Adam is breaking the popping our cherry here.
That's what he said. All right.
Yeah. So cool. Yeah. Live episode. Of course. We bring in current events.
Yes.
Break down all things minding your biz. Teaching this money game. Right.
Yeah.
So that's
he is the money of the money game.
Yeah.
Right? Talk about private equity. That is something a lot of times, even in our community, because we're Black and brown people, and we don't have a lot of access to know a lot about.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to bring different insights and different opinions and different strategies on how money is being made out here. I thought it was before I go into it, because I definitely was about to just go ahead. I think you should introduce our guest, because I was about to go somewhere else. Sometimes I do that. So I'm gonna let you go. But yes, we're excited. We're gonna talk about private equity. We're gonna talk a little bit, all the things.
So hey y'all, we got visionary empire builder, CEO, coach, top 1% speaker, 3-time #1 best-selling author. I got Adam Coffey, builds a high-performance culture, transformative exponential growth. Coffey is the founding partner of CEO Advisory Guru, providing consulting services to PE portfolio companies. Those are private equity founders, family offices, and elite executives. So welcome to the show, AC. Can I call you AC?
Absolutely. Thank you. You too. It's good to be here after some minor technical difficulties. It's good to connect. And so hello to your audience out there in YouTube land.
No, I appreciate it. Appreciate it. So we're going to just kind of jump right in there. I wanted to ask, so Adam, basically, I'm a fan of the books. I read all the books. And so we taught a couple episodes. Nobody probably knew, but I used some of the information in the book in our earlier episodes. But just throughout your career, private equity, in writing the private equity playbook, I gather you've seen a lot, numerous business go through many different transformations, right? What do you believe is the most critical strategies or mindset that business owners need to adapt when preparing their company for private equity investments, and how can they ensure a successful partnership?
Well, I think. And so let me say, the reason I wrote the private equity playbook, wrote it in 2018, came out in 2019. That book's #1 this morning on Amazon.
Congrats.
And a second edition of it, I just got done with, just came out. It's funny because the #1 edition's in the #2 edition. Plus I added more content, but it's the #1 edition that's #1 this morning.
That's
and this
good.
one's number 13. And I'm like, hey folks, it's you're buying the older version, which is fine. I'm good. But let me just tell you, even to this day, if I teach a seminar and I've got 1,000 people sitting in a room, and I give them a basic, these are all business owners. They're all multimillionaires, successful people in their own right. If I give a basic 10-question multiple choice quiz on private equity, 90% of the room will fail. Yeah. Doesn't matter what color you are, doesn't matter where you come from. I'm 90% of the people on the planet, even though we know the term, fail the basic test, miserably. I mean, little question, basic questions like, what's the average lifespan of a private equity fund? It's 10 years, and people.
I read that in the book. I learned that. I appreciate that.
Well, you know what? I've only had 2 people now since I've been doing this. I've been doing this for 5 years, who have aced my test, and they were both women. And both of them said, read your book the night before the seminar. I was flying into town, and, one of them had an eidetic memory, just aced the test, but 90% of the room typically fails. Those who pass usually pass with a 6 out of 10. They get a D, 60%. So I'd say, let's just start by saying, if you own a business in today's world, there's a high probability you couldn't pass my basic 10-question quiz. And so start by getting educated.
Yeah.
You know, as entrepreneurs, the reason why there is a market for us to sell our businesses and make a lot of money, you know, get a wheelbarrow full of gold and ride off into the sunset or keep going. You know, one of the reasons that opportunity exists is because there is 6 trillion in assets under management. Right this second, there's over $1 trillion in committed capital looking for companies to buy right now. You know, private equity today buys 50% of all companies bought and sold on the planet. And aside from banks, private equity is the world's largest lender, you know, of capital to other companies. And so we really need as entrepreneurs to have a very good basic understanding of what private equity is, how it works, so that in layman's terms, we can manipulate it to our advantage as entrepreneurs and business owners so that we can generate wealth for our families, take care of our employees, you know, all that kind of good stuff. Private equity sees us, entrepreneurs and operators of companies, they see us as a tool. We need to see them as a tool too, a tool to get capital to grow, to get our companies to a bigger place, you know, so that we can monetize the company again and again and again. You know, a lot of entrepreneurs think selling their business is a one and done event. It's the end of the road. I built my company. I'm going to sell it. I'm going to go away. And I tell people, you know, that first sale, that's just a rest stop on the wealth creation highway. No reason for you to disappear. You know, I've made a career. You know, I ran companies for 21 years for 9 different private equity firms. My personal record is selling the same company 5 times in 13 years. And so you can get multiple paydays while diversifying your wealth and getting some chips off the table and making sure that your family's secure for the future while still being aggressive and growing, using other people's money and getting second and third bites of the apple. So private equity, it's an important thing for us to understand because it's the key to our wealth creation when it's time to exit or monetize our business.
No, that's good. I mean, it was a lot said there because I definitely wanted to ask, like, what's the benefit of, you know, most people try to get their company to be sold one time, right? But here it is, you're talking about, hey, we could sell a company over 5 times and the owner of the company still benefits from it, right? But I guess before we get there, though, I think what I want to kind of get into is the fact that it seems like, you know, before or not before this book, right? Private equity seemed to be almost like, you know, it was a thing, but it wasn't like publicly like known, or it wasn't like the big commodity out there. So if I'm a business owner, I guess how would I align with the private equity firm to help grow my company? What does that look like going into it? How do we find them? What do we say to them? How do we pitch it?
Well, in today's world, you don't need to find them because I'm guessing if you own a business, your phone's already ringing because private equity has kind of permeated every industry on the planet. You know, and if you can't go through a day without seeing a logo of a company owned by private equity. You may not know it. You know, you can't even go camping in Denali National Park in Alaska by yourself, you know, and not see logos. You know, not that you're going to see it tattooed on a deer's behind, you know, or something, but because half your camping gear is going to be owned by, you know, a company that or made by a company that's owned by private equity. It's like you just can't escape it. Gotcha. It's everywhere. It's permeated everywhere. And so entrepreneurs in today's world, you know, private equity is out there doing what I'll call roll-ups. So they're buying a platform company or a little bit bigger company that serves as the platform for investment. And then that company is out there buying a bunch of little companies in the same industry, pulling them in and rolling it up and making a bigger company. You know, why? Because bigger companies trade for higher multiples than smaller companies.
Yeah.
You know, and so couple quick stats. You know, in the United States, just our country, there's 33 million small companies, you know, doing business in the United States. They employ over half of the workers in the United States. They represent 99.9% of all businesses in the country. 33 million just here. But there's only 3,000 companies on the entire planet that have $1 billion in revenue, which means that small companies, which are so plentiful, trade for small numbers because there aren't as many buyers. But as we get bigger, we become rare. We're getting above the pack. We're now bigger. and some of these bigger PE funds that come swooping in looking for a bigger company to buy to start with. And it's like, oh, here's one, and they pay a much higher multiple. And so our companies become more valuable as they get bigger. Private equity, kind of the number one way they generate returns for their shareholders is to do a buy and build. So the last company I was a CEO of, I bought, we started with a platform company, had over 100 million in revenue. And then I bought 23 small companies from entrepreneurs, who essentially had built a business up to somewhere between 10 and 30 million. And hell, they're rare. Of those 33 million small companies, only 7% ever get to $1 million in revenue.
Yeah.
Only 4% of those ever get to 10 million in revenue. But here are some companies, I buy 23 of them, and these guys are all at around 20, 30 million in size. I buy 23, I put them together, I put them on top of the bigger company I started with. Before you know it, it's like I got a company with 600-700 million in revenue, that is earning a ton of money, and bigger PE firms see this meal that didn't exist before I built it, and they're swooping in like, oh man, opportunity to put a lot of our investors' money to work, our limited partners' money to work, and so it's like, that company trades for a lot of money. And so because this phenomenon's going on, small business owners are getting phone calls. I'm working on 3 buy and builds right now in the accounting industry. There's 1.8 million small accounting firms in the United States. 1.8 million. There aren't enough buyers. And so, prices being paid are low, and there's people out there saying, I got to get me some, accounting firms. Let's roll them up. Let's get a bunch of them, put them together. So, this is basic activity. So the good news is you don't have to look very hard to find them because they're looking really hard to find you.
For sure.
No,
so your phone's probably
that's
ringing.
like right down our alley. Like so if you were to look at a accounting firm, what would be like your criteria to have a certain amount of clients, like what, or some key things you would focus in on, even for our business owners that are out there listening, right? If they want to sell, how desirable do they need to make their company for you to come in and show interest?
So let's think about a framework. What makes an industry attractive to a buyer? And, first of all, you can make money in any kind of business, any kind of industry. I'm an example of that. I've run companies that don't meet my own criteria, and I've made money. But to stack the deck in your favor, if I was seeking to start something today, I'll give you the framework, the magic, to success. We start with, we want a company that's focused on needs, not wants. So, if I'm going out to dinner on Friday night, mama wants a new outfit. If it's raining and it's leaking, my roof is leaking and it's raining on my head and I'm sitting inside my home office here, I need my roof fixed.
For sure.
Doesn't matter whether I'm employed, unemployed, broke or not. When I have a basic need, I have to fulfill that need. So we talked about bookkeeping and accounting. Well, most small businesses need bookkeeping. I'm no different. Hey, I'm a guy with billions in exits. But at the same time, my little company, I'm not an accountant. I don't play one on TV. I have an accounting service that does my books every month, and goes through all my QuickBooks and makes sure I've been doing stuff right. And, I make mistakes here and there once in a while. It's like I need somebody coming behind me to make sure my books are in good order and feed it all off to Deloitte tax. So I'm paying my taxes, appropriately and what have you. So I need bookkeeping service. Now, bookkeeping, so it needs, not wants. That's first. Second, contracted revenue, recurrent revenue versus project-based. So I need my roof fixed if it's leaking, but I only buy one roof every 15 to 20 years, right? So that's project-based. So if somebody sells me a new roof today, next month they start with no revenue, and they got to find someone else who needs a roof just to replace the revenue from my roof. And so they're always like going to zero and having to find new clients just to retread old ground. Now let's take that bookkeeping, company as an example. Contracted revenue. I've got a contract every month. They're hitting my credit card. They're charging me my $700-800 a month or whatever it is for my bookkeeping service, and they just keep on charging me. And so First of the month, they bill me. Third of the month, they've hit my credit card. Money's already in the bank. When they find a new client, it doesn't replace me. It adds on top of me. And so I've got this growing recurrent revenue stream. Another great example is pest control. If I want to go low tech, hey, I live in Texas. You could put saddles on some of these bugs out here, let me tell you. And so mama wants, nothing in the house, right? So I got 2 pest control companies that come here and spray my perimeter. Not one, I got 2, and they hit my credit card every month. And then, hey, we got mosquitoes around here that it's like Avatar. You could fly on the back of these things. And so, it's like, hey, Adam, that's a different service. Would you like us to come spray for mosquitoes? Different guy, different truck, different chemicals. Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Should we hit your card on file? Yeah. Go ahead. So now they're hitting me twice. Right. Hey, Adam, man, we got termites around here. That's a third service. Do you want us to protect your house for termites? Sure, go ahead. Okay, that's a third. Hey, we got army worms that eat your lawn and they come out of the swamp around here, and they come out in the summer. We gotta spray your lawn for insects too. That's a 4th contract. It's like before you know it, it's like they're hitting my card, just lickety split like 4 or 5 times a month. And all of this revenue is additive. And I just forget about these contracts. And so needs, not wants, contracted revenue. And so think about this accounting firm, needs, not wants, contracted revenue. They don't even need a truck and a guy in a truck with a sprayer. It's like the product is in their head. Professional service companies are typically very high margin companies. So I find, accounting firms all day long that are like 3 million in revenue, $1 million in EBITDA or earnings. Because there's almost no capital expenditure in these businesses, that EBITDA is really free cash flow. Yeah. And because there's 1.8 million accounting firms in the US, you're buying it for 3 times, 3.5 times. And so I'm buying $1 million in cash flow for about 3 to 3.5 million. If I borrow 100% of the cost of that business and don't put any equity in at all, I'm going to have around $500,000 a year in payments on a fully amortized 10-year loan, which I could get from the SBA. And I've got $1 million in cash flow to cover $500,000 in loan payments, which means I have a 2-to-1 debt coverage ratio. I'm a slam dunk to get that loan approved. And so the type of business that we buy informs how successful we might be in a buy and build. You can be successful in roofing companies. I'm working with 9 roofing companies right now, as a matter of fact, and they're all doing buy and builds, and they're buying other roofing companies, and they're going to make a ton of money. So they don't hit every one of my criteria, but they hit a lot. It's a need business, et cetera. And so, we can be different kinds of businesses, but inherently I want my business. We don't focus on revenue, entrepreneurs, focus on earnings. $100 million company that's making $6 million a year is worth less than a $50 million company making $6 million a year. Life is not about size. It's not about revenue. It's about earnings and profitability. And so we need to be attractive, to a private equity firm. As we're getting bigger, we need structure. Here's a litmus test. If you can't take a month off and leave your business and come back and it's still there and it's still making money and it's still taking care of customers, whatever the product or service is, and if you must be there, you don't have a sellable business. You've got a lifestyle business that requires your presence. And so I was working with somebody yesterday on this question, and it's like, you are so much, you're so tied to this business. Think of Oprah Winfrey as an example, because this is what this guy does for a living. He's like a mini, Oprah Winfrey. So Oprah, when she's on TV, is making a bunch of money. Well, Oprah had to be on camera to make that money. But once Oprah bought, or started the Oprah Winfrey Network, well, she's no longer on camera.
All right.
That's now a sellable business. That is now a media icon. It's a powerhouse. It can be sold because she's no longer the talent on the camera. She may choose to get on camera once in a while. She did recently for Kamala, but she doesn't have to be there. She's got a network. She's got an empire, and that thing is sellable. So, that's a litmus test for you out there. To be sellable, you got to be able to detach yourself from the business, and the business still works. I'm sorry, I've been going on a roll here.
No, you're good. It's good to us.
100%.
This is our language. You're not boring us.
For sure. So just a little background, because I know we kind of all green in here, but we are both accountants and run our own accounting firm. And so
my favorite space right now.
Yeah. So before you mentioned like, hey, it's 1.8 million accounting firms. That's the language I was just telling them about.
But here's one thing. Can I just mention this real quick?
Ahead.
If you're an accounting firm, if you do audit work, you have to be owned by a CPA.
Right.
And so that makes it difficult because a PE firm is not a CPA.
Right.
And since they primarily buy out companies using buyout funds, they must buy a 51% or more control stake in a business.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they're wired. They can't buy a firm that does audit work. And so as I'm looking at and evaluating bookkeeping, accounting, payroll services type firms, one of the first things I'm looking at is how much audit work do they do?
Yeah.
Because a firm that doesn't do the audit work doesn't need to be owned by a majority shareholder CPA.
Mm-hmm.
So nuance, but if you're out there with an accounting firm and you do all CPA, audit type work, then you're not going to be as attractive as a firm that's doing primarily bookkeeping.
Yeah.
And then if you're doing bookkeeping for business, it's okay to be doing a lot of tax work, because typically if I'm doing your bookkeeping as a company, you're going to need your taxes done.
For sure.
And if you're going to need your taxes done for the company, you're probably going to have me do your personal taxes too.
For sure.
And so tax work that is associated with the bookkeeping is fine, but a company that just does tax work, also not as attractive a subset in the accounting world, because you got to staff up. You got 2 times a year where it's really, really busy, and then you're twiddling your thumbs the rest of the year, and you have to be able to staff the expenses down. So, so the profile of a better accounting firm would be one that does a lot of bookkeeping.
Yeah.
It does tax work related to its bookkeeping small business clients, and it's not focused on doing audit work. So there is nuances to every industry.
For sure. No, perfect. That's kind of the type of talk we just talk about all the time. I'm curious with the work in the private equity, right? You becoming a CEO. Speak a little bit about that leadership in the CEO. If you CEO of a company, what are the top few things that we're kind of jumping into that change the companies around to increase EBITDA, increase earnings for the company to even buy out those other 23 companies you mentioned? One of the companies.
Well, first of all, I was a CEO for 21 years, and to me that means Chief Entertainment Officer. It's like I'm a den mother. I buy 23 companies, my last empire, 34 companies, the one before that. And I'm a den mother. I've got, last company, 23 entrepreneurs, never had a boss before. And now they're all working for me. And to get 23 people that I just made rich because I bought all their companies, gave them a wheelbarrow full of gold, and now they got a boss for the first time ever, getting them to all sing Kumbaya around the fire and point in the same direction. That's the magic, for me as a CEO. And so it's a you buy businesses from people, and they have personalities and they have ways of thinking and doing things. But I'll tell you, when you're working with private equity, it's business as a professional sport played at the very highest level. So let me throw out 2 names, Michael Jordan, and Kobe Bryant, 2 of the greatest basketball players who ever played the game. Both coached by Phil Jackson, right? Both of those guys dedicated to winning championships, understanding that they need to practice hard every day. Can't mail it in, can't just show up at game time and say, hey, it's time to play. They work hard at practice. They work hard in the off season. They're hitting the weights. It's like they're committed to excellence and success. That's the kind of mindset that you need to have when you're playing business as a professional sport at the highest level. One of the biggest problems I see with entrepreneurs that I work with today, I call it the accidental arrogance of success.
Mm.
They beat a lot of odds to get to where they're at. But you know what? If there's nobody to hold them accountable, there's no Phil Jackson. And so if they're having a bad year, if they're not hitting numbers, there's no downside. There's no one to slap them around. You know, if I'm not hitting numbers in my GE days, I'm gonna get fired.
All
you know,
right.
if I'm a CEO, I've got a board of directors. If I'm not hitting my numbers, I'm gonna get fired. It's like I'm gonna get traded. You know, I'm gonna get thrown out, you know, with the garbage. It's like there's somebody there to hold me accountable. With a lot of entrepreneurs, it's like, hey, it's a bad year. Oh, well, it's a bad year. I'll do better next year. No, that's not the right answer. The right answer is, how can I work harder? How can I get through that wall, over that wall, around that wall, or under that wall that's blocking me from success or attaining success at a higher level? And so, you know, it's a very intense world when you're working with private equity, and you need to be prepared, you know, for that. And you know, you're going to have a boss for the first time. And I know a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with that. Hey, look, if I'm not the majority control shareholder, you know, I'm God's gift, you know, to whatever I do. I'm God's gift to pest control or HVAC.
Right.
And if I'm not the boss calling the shots, I don't want to have nothing to do with this company. That's
Right.
kind of the attitude. And the way I always, you know, address that, you know, is two names: Elon Musk, you know, and Jeff Bezos.
Mm.
Now, depending on who's divorced, you know, at the time, you know, arguably two of the richest people on the planet,
They're still doing
both
pretty
of
good
them
now.
own
Right.
less. Yeah, both of them own less than 13% of their respective companies.
Yeah.
You can be a minority shareholder and keep generating wealth, but you have to be ready to be held accountable.
Yeah.
And you got to have a Michael Jordan or a Kobe Bryant kind of mentality that I'm going to hit my numbers. I'm going to have a budget, and I'm going to find a way to make that number happen. You know, and if you have the right mindset, you know, and the right attitude, and you are open to then listening to others, you know, you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You know, you can augment your own weaknesses with someone else's strengths and create a much better, you know, kind of leadership effort and team. And so you know, these are some of the common themes, you know, that cause an entrepreneur to have a bad experience if they sell to private equity and it doesn't work out. It's probably, you know, more than likely they weren't prepared. You know, they're not ready to, hey, I just got a wheelbarrow full of gold. I'm God's gift. I don't need to be held accountable. I don't need to work hard anymore. And it's like, well, that person that just gave you that wheelbarrow full of gold, they ain't earned nothing yet. And they need you to work harder than you've ever worked before. And they're going to share that wealth creation with you, and you're going to get a second bite of the apple, and it can be bigger than the first, but you got to work hard, and you got to want it, and you got to go get it. So
I love that. I'm gonna ask a real, you know, lifestyle question, because we talk about budgeting, managing money, but people get into private equity to make money, right? It is a lot of money to be made there. So I just want to ask you a question. What you could definitely have been personally involved in? What was the largest deal you negotiated in terms of either buying or a buy and build that you were involved in?
So selling, I've sold companies for over $1 billion, multiple times. Buying, the biggest acquisition I personally made in my career, the company was $125 million in revenue. I was invading Canada. I was a large North American company. So I had built out, I was a regional company in the US that became a national company through a buy and build, buying a bunch of companies, putting it together, growing organically. And then I wanted to invade Canada, you know, and so I wanted to go north of the border. I wanted an acquisition. You know, doing business in Canada is teaching an American company how to go to Europe, because Canada operates much closer to how the EU operates than it does an American company. And so, you know, when I'm invading new territory, I need to buy a company that already knows how the lay of the land works. They've got customers that are complying with the laws, and I don't want to make mistakes, foot faults, because I'm ignorant as to what the laws are in a new country. So I made an acquisition of a pretty sizable company. I think at the time I was probably 500 million in revenue, somewhere around there in the US. Bought a company that was 125 million in Canada. in order to, to go up there. And it took a while to get that one done. It was a bigger deal. It required a lot of financing, to be raised when we bought it. And so that was probably the biggest. But I've done dozens of small ones too that I didn't even consider acquisitions. Really, matter of fact, I didn't even get involved. I just had my sales team treated. It was almost like you were signing a large contract, with a company rather than buying a company. So I'd say my typical 58 acquisitions, my typical average size was probably 20 to 30 million in revenue. And I was putting them on top of a company that had 100 to 200 million in revenue when I started, and I'm buying 20, I'm buying 30, and I'm building something that's much bigger. And then, along the way, there's times where, private equity needs to leave and time where a new private equity firm needs to come in. And again, if you understand how private equity works, the magic of it is, that probably they're going to come and go about every 5 years. And so if you're good at your job, you can engineer it to happen about every 3 years, and you can get more paydays, across your career, as you're growing the company. But you need to understand what they need to declare success and for them to leave. And so I would be very transparent with my employees too. It's like, I don't ever want it to be secretive. It's like, hey, we have private shareholders and they're going to come and go. And I'm building $1 billion business, and we're going to need lots of capital, and we're going to be buying companies, and there's going to be lots of opportunity for growth for you, for leadership team, for employees. I'm going to build a company that's got great benefits, that's got a great culture. You're going to love working here, and you're going to have to work hard, and I'm going to hold you accountable, but I'm also going to take care of you. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions. I think the news teaches us that private equity is a bad thing. On the news, we don't ever hear good stories about anything. We just hear bad stories. Private equity is evil. They destroy jobs. They break up companies. I wrote the book because that wasn't my experience. I built companies that had great cultures, that took care of people, where people would bring their family members, their children, and their relatives to come work because they felt it was a great place to be. And so I think you can be a company that takes care of people, that grows and makes money for shareholders. You can do all of those things at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. And so the private equity world that I worked with, is different sometimes than the private equity world you hear about on TV. And I'll give you one specific example. During COVID, I was owned by a company called Ares Management. Ares Management's the world's largest non-bank lender. And they're also have a big private equity arm. They own my company. When COVID hit, they started a foundation inside every company that they owned. And they seeded the foundation with their own capital, 6 figures, and they said, CEOs, take care of your employees. Employees impacted by COVID, and, who were off for an extended period of time and were struggling financially. Maybe they had a death, in the family, heaven forbid. Remember, it was pretty bleak when COVID first started. And, they were giving money to the companies, setting up foundations, paying the legal expenses, teaching the companies how to convert, vacation time or other things into cash that we could fund, this foundation with, all for the benefit of employees. You didn't hear about that on the news. I promise you.
No.
So private equity is not just a bunch of evil people who are out to destroy. They can actually be very good partners and good stewards. All that's required is you got to work hard, because we're all working hard towards a common goal. We're trying to generate wealth. In their world, they're trying to return to their investors, to their limited partners. They're trying to return a return on an investment that's been made. They make their money off of the returns that they earn for their investors. But management shares in that wealth. I think in my career, there's a long wake behind me of millionaires that were created in the companies that I built and sold multiple times.
I love that. I think that's good to hear, because sometimes when you think about private equity coming in, you think about them displacing employees, management, downsizing, cutting to make it work. So I think, what you said is really good, being transparent, like, hey, this is happening. but we're going to take care of you in that manner. I think I love that. I like to hear that. It warms my heart, because when you buy businesses, you're trying to, of course, like you said, make more money, and sometimes the cost of people is sometimes your biggest cost. But
you know what I think along those lines, what I think is important to remember is that for a business to stay on top, for a Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant to stay on top, they keep working, and a company needs to constantly be reinvesting itself in technology. It's got to make small changes every day in order to stay relevant and productive. And what happens in some companies is they get stagnant and complacent, and we don't change. And then over time, performance erodes, and before you know it, now it's a turnaround situation. And so somebody that comes in, every time I came into a company, I was hired as a CEO because the company wasn't performing and it had lost its way, probably because other CEOs or people weren't making the small incremental changes that needed to be made along the way. And now all of a sudden it's broke. And so Adam comes in, and sometimes Adam does have to do things, that are disruptive to people. But it's almost like, this is a patient that just came into ER, and it's like, I'm trying to keep it from bleeding out. And sometimes I gotta do something to make it saved. But I always care about people, and I'm very transparent. Here's what's wrong. Here's why it's wrong. Here's what we're gonna do about it. And if I ever had to displace people, I took really good care of people, in terms of, so I've got this one weird quirk, as a CEO, there's been plenty of times in my career where I've had to let executives go, people that worked for me, and I had to let them go. I'm still friends with everybody that I've ever fired. And they follow me on places like LinkedIn, and I'll post something and they'll like it, or make a positive comment about it. And these are people that I unfortunately had to impact their lives, in a negative fashion. But I didn't just kick them off the bus and forget about them. I took care of them. I helped them get their next job. I served as references for them. I did my best to try to be, a good steward to these people who were impacted. You can learn a lot about a person, not by how they treat a star, but by how they treat somebody that they fire, or have to let go. And so, there are times, where you have to make tough calls. I've always told employees, look, I'm the captain of the ship. This ship's got 3,000 souls aboard. And if I've got to kick one off to save the other 2,999, then by God, I'm going to do it. I'm going to give them a dinghy with 30 days worth of food. I'm going to take care of them. I'm going to call the Coast Guard to come get them. I'm going to do whatever the hell I can to protect them. But I will make tough choices. And it's the reason why we got into this position is because people didn't make tough choices, along the way. And so I'm going to fix this thing. You're going to love working here. I'm going to take care of you. And I'm going to always let you know where everything stands. That's the key. Being a CEO, being a leader doesn't mean you're always going to do positive things. Sometimes there will be negative things. But if you're authentic and you're transparent, people will recognize the good. And they'll see sometimes we have to do a change that's negative, and they'll be like, okay, there's a yin to the yang. I get it, understand it, but I see both sides. I don't just see negative, and life can't just be positive.
Oh, that's really good, Adam. That's really good. This is very, very, very helpful.
Insightful.
I think insightful. Yeah. Brought our audience a whole lot of stuff that we talk about is like affirming, confirming all the things that we can think about. Right before we kind of I know we got to make a move here. I did want to ask, like, what do you think from your military experience to you being a CEO, how much that impacted the knowledge you learned from the military, impacted your leadership qualities? Sounds like relationships are very important to you, and the way we go about handling those things as well.
The military creates servant leaders. We didn't have a term for it. They've been cranking out servant leaders for 250 years in this country, and it's only recently that the business world put this title servant leader on it. But when I started in the military, I started at the bottom. I was a private E1, coming out of high school, went in the service, in the Army. I was the lowest form of life God created. I could look up and see bubble gum on the bottom of some other dude's shoe. I mean, that's how low I was, on the totem pole. And so military taught me about discipline, teamwork, leadership, as I moved up, in rank, sergeant and squad and taking care of others and take the hill and follow me. And, it's like, it really teaches you, I think, the value of working as a group, and not looking at color or religious belief or background. It's like, you know what, if you were ever in trouble, do I give a damn whether you're a Republican or a Democrat? You're there to help me. I'm going to rely on you. It's like it really breaks through barriers, and I'll say, racial barriers, religious barriers, background, wealth. It's like, boy, you're thrown together in a melting pot, and you have to rely on each other in order to succeed. So that was a great skill early. But because I started at the bottom, and literally I've held every job a person could hold on an org chart, from the bottom all the way to the top. And so I know that when I was at the bottom, I was a good person, and I worked hard and I believed in others. And so that DNA never left me. I didn't get some superiority complex. I wasn't born with a gold spoon in my mouth. I worked my way up, and I know the value of people who work hard in the trenches. And I know it takes all, in order to find success. And so that's that servant leadership attitude, starting at the bottom, working my way up. All of that informed my CEO thinking. And when I first was a CEO, it wasn't as popular back then to be a servant leader as a CEO who really cared about culture and people. World was driven by just purely financial results. That's all there was to it. But what I discovered was, if I built a really strong culture, I would get an engaged workforce, and that workforce would work hard, and they would take care of customers. Customers would give us more stuff, and revenue was just, fall from the skies. It was it was a product of a strong culture. And I'd say in today's world, you have to be that kind of CEO, because if you're going to build an empire, you need employees. And today, nobody wants to work anymore. Everybody wants to be a TikTok star. I want to make $1 million a year being a TikTok star. I'm not going to work hard. I'm going to lay on my mama's couch. It's like damn expensive out there to go buy a house. So if you're going to need thousands of employees on your journey to building a big company, you're going to need people. You want to attract people, you better be authentic. You better be transparent. You better care about their opinions, and you can't pay lip service to culture, because today's employees are smart and they'll sniff that out in a second. And so I'd say today, culture is far more important to the business world than it might have been 20, 30 years ago. Back then we were just numbers driven, and people were harsh, in how they thought about leadership. Because of those early days in the military and starting at the bottom, I learned a different road. And I think that road has kind of become mainstream today.
No, for sure.
Yeah. How do you see that as we move towards modernization, like with AI and that type of thing? Because that tends to then exit out a lot of people, right? And so there's a lot of private equity money sitting there, right? And so it's like a twofold question. I'm so sorry. Do you think that going into automations, and because that will eliminate people, right? How do you then create the culture that private equity then comes, off the sidelines and then want to buy your company, when it's going to be less maybe people focused, in a sense?
So
If you can kind of understand my question.
These are really good questions in today's world. Right now today, we've got a strike at all the U.S. ports, right? And part of the ask of the unions is a pledge for no automation. Yes. Because you can automate ports, and cranes and computer controlled this or computer controlled that. And so I think, and these are really high paid people and really high paid jobs. And so people are worried about technology being a disruptor. And technology is moving faster today than ever before. I'm 60. I'm not 160. I'm only 60. But if I go back to the beginning of my career, we had no cell phones. We had no computers on our desk. We had no email. We had no voicemail. There were like 5 channels on TV, and that was it, and video games didn't exist. And it's like, the amount of time, that's passed in my career is just a blip. But the amount of technology that's come into our mainstream of life today, is just
Huge.
epic change in a very short period of time. I can't even imagine going back, to those days. It's like, how do we survive? How do we exist? And here's what I'll tell you about technology. When it informs us, helps us, aids us, we adopt it readily without question. It's when it potentially disrupts us or we're scared that we fight it. And it's just an interesting side note. Can you imagine somebody coming into the future, from 1950, 1960, and looking at the world today? Their first question would be is, why the hell is everybody walking around with this thing on their head? What's all this crap? And it's like, we got to learn how to do everything one-handed, because we film everything while we're living it. It's like no one's living in the moment. We're filming it for Instagram, or TikTok or whatever, right? It's like life has changed. So here's what I'll tell you. I think of work that humans do is high value or low value. I don't care if you're a janitor or a surgeon. There's things that we do that are high value, low value. So if I'm a service technician, high value is being in front of broken stuff and fixing it, because that's my skill. Low value is filling out paperwork. It's ordering parts. It's driving from one location to another. And so the way that I think of technology is I look at all my employees and I look at the high value work I want them to do more of, and the low value work that's a pain in their butts that they don't like doing anyway. I'm looking for technology, and I'm looking for disruptive things to remove or eliminate the low value work so that my employees spend more time doing the high value work. And I've spent decades investing in technology because I think it's the key to employee productivity. It's not to eliminate employees. It's to get them focused on doing more high value work and eliminate all the crap they don't like doing anyway, getting either outsourcing it, automating it, et cetera. I'm involved in a company right now. I'm on the board of a company that does robotics integration. Here's some scary statistics. We're onshoring manufacturing back to the US. We've learned a lesson, can't be outsourced to China forever. We need to bring that back. And so by the end of this decade, we'll have a shortage of more than 1 million people working in manufacturing plants. They just don't exist. At some level, automation has to come in for the people we do have in order to get the job done. So there are problems that technology can solve. And so we just have to be thoughtful. I don't think AI eliminates people. I just don't. I think it augments what people do, and it helps us automate low value work. But at the end of the day, I still think people are involved, and so we need to evolve. If you go back to the turn of the century, there was a blacksmith on every corner. Not this century, but the one before.
Sure.
And then cars came.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, there were no blacksmiths.
Yeah.
But then we needed a gas station on every corner.
Yeah.
And we needed a different kind of blacksmith who worked on a different kind of horse. Right. So it's like technology will evolve and jobs need to evolve. We can't fight technology. Technology is here to stay. So we need to embrace it. We need to be, looking at it, thoughtfully around, can I use that technology to make my workers more productive, to eliminate the stuff they don't want to do anyway, so I can get them doing higher value work. Over time, jobs may change, positions may change. That's okay. Again, I go back 40 years, no computer, no email, no voicemail, no cell phone. And I didn't even know anybody in the world used pagers still until I saw what happened in Lebanon with pagers. I'm like, I thought that was a bygone era for me. I used to have a pager.
Like, what? Yeah.
You know what? To this day, I cannot have my phone on. It's always on silent. I can never have the ringer on, because it just stresses the hell out of me, because I'm used to waking up in the middle of the night with my pager beeping and me like, scrambling to like come to. It's like I've got PTSD from beepers. Beepers going off at weird times. And so it's like, I didn't even know people still use beepers. So, I mean, technology is going to evolve. We can't fight it. We need to embrace it. We need to be thoughtful about it. And, and if we're an unskilled worker that's afraid of being disrupted, then we need to think about how do I train myself and how do I adapt, to a changing world, because the world's not going to stop for us. It's going to keep moving. And so we need to keep moving, and we need to keep learning and growing.
So, as we kind of wrap up here, Adam, that was really good. I mean, very good insight. I just kind of want to know, like, what you think over the next 5 to 10 years will look like for businesses, private equity, kind of like your final thoughts you want to give to the audience.
So we're in a very divided time in our history, right and left. And, I watched last night's debate, the VP debate, whether you're Democrat, Republican. It was good to have people talking civilly rather than, insulting each other and shaking hands. It's like, I've often told people, it's like, boy, I hate the political rancor, going on in our country right now. Give me Ronald Reagan with Tip O'Neill or Bill Clinton with Newt Gingrich any day of the week, because back then it's like right and left, we were close enough together that we worked together. I think what business needs is stability. Yeah. We need economic stability. We need to understand the rules of the game so that we can play a long-term, businesses are long-term animals. It's like we do have short-term results, but we're planning for the next 10 years, 15 years. We need to know what kind of environment we're going to have. And when the environment keeps on shifting left, right, depending on who's in power at a given time, it's a tumultuous time in politics, not just in the US, globally.
Yeah.
A lot of weird stuff going on, France and the UK. And so I think humanity is struggling right now. And what business needs is stability. I don't care what the stability is, it just needs stable. We need to know the rules of the game so that we can plan for the long-term, prospects or health of our companies. And so, stability is good. Wars are not. I'm just amazed. We literally have war going on in the Middle East, and the stock market's up.
Yeah.
At record levels. It's like, boy, that would have never happened, 20, 30 years ago. It's like, and so I think the world's fragile. The world's in a weird place right now, and it could go any number of ways. You've got, war in Europe. You've got war in the Middle East. We're kind of isolated from it back here, but it's like there's a lot of volatility. There's a lot of potential volatility. So what we really need in the world is stability. Give us stability, give us some sane thoughts, right or left, and let's just get back to some kind of long-term stable type world so that businesses can plan. We can plan to hire, plan our investments, things like that.
Good. Appreciate it. That was really, really good. Let everybody know how they can find you, reach you, buy your book, any upcoming things you got coming on. And we definitely want to have you back on the show soon. So
any conferences, mentorships, what's happening in your world?
Yeah. So the real Adam Coffey can be found on LinkedIn. Yeah. I'm on LinkedIn. That's my main platform because there's 830 million business people on there, and I'm a business guy and I'm a business consultant. Yeah. There is a fake Adam on Instagram that's got 10,000 followers, but that's not me. I'm not on Instagram, and that fake person is monetizing people, I'm sure. And I've told Meta, and Meta doesn't care. So I'm not on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram. Real Adam Coffey. You come to LinkedIn, you reach out to me, you get me. Yeah. My books are on Amazon or anywhere books are sold. They're easy to find. Just type in my name. I love hearing from people who read my books. I donate all my royalties to charity, by the way, just so everybody knows. I wrote my books to help you. They fuel my philanthropic work, my giving back activities, but they're written for you. So you'll find them on Amazon or anywhere books are sold. And then as a consultant, I work with, again, 71 founders right now. 71 different entrepreneurs. I work with private equity firms. I work with a lot of people in the world of business. My goal, last 10 years of my career, is to help you succeed. And I've been blessed. Had a good run. And so I decided last 10 years, done running companies, I'm going to help entrepreneurs beat the odds, teach them how to succeed. So that's what I'm doing. So thank you for having me on. Thank you to your listeners out there. Hopefully there were some good nuggets in there.
It was.
I definitely think it was. Yeah. I definitely think it was. We definitely will stay in touch, and definitely would love to have you back on. And we'll be reaching out. I know I will definitely.
All right. Good deal. Take care, you guys.
I appreciate it, Adam. Thank you.
Bye for now.
Later.
That was good, right? I enjoyed the interview. His book is very digestible, right? It wasn't too highbrow. I learned a lot from the book.
I'm a CEO, man. I hate long meetings, and so I hate long books. It's like if someone can't read it in 5 hours, it's too long, and they need to be able to understand what they're reading.
No, for sure.
It was
for
good.
Sure. Is easily digestible.
He's gonna be my new quote, according to that, CEO Adam Coffey in his book. This is what I got. This is what I
really
had.
Good information. Really good information. So again, y'all, we'll wrap it up here. Another episode of Minding Your Biz, and we'll see y'all in the next episode. Don't forget to keep minding your biz. We'll see you later.